saves forgetting it.
Oh, I just realised I wrote a whole quiz on my fucking MacBook and now I can't access it.
You'll get it back.
Yeah, but the quiz is it's a virtual quiz for this Sunday. Ah. Luckily, I store everything in the cloud, but.
Is he on? No. Did I do a slightly longer introduction, do you think?
No, I think you introduced the book right at the very pre-Ben chat. Oh, you mean the introduction right off the bat?
Yeah.
Nah, I like the way you just kind of go into it. What do you need? What do you think you need to say? What additional stuff?
Everyone who's going to listen to the podcast who would have heard of Astroball, it's not going to be like, oh no, Astroball, not heard of that.
Well, yeah, I suppose that's the question.
And if you haven't heard of Astroball and you hear that introduction, then the brief introduction, then it'll be enough, won't it? Right, Bill's here. Okay, here we go. William. Hi, William.
Hello there.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for bearing with us.
No problem at all. Sitting around pacing, waiting, but that's okay.
How's everything going where you are?
Oh, we're doing well here. Same problems everyone else is having, but we're coping with it.
Yeah.
I'm here in Texas right now, a little town called Dobbin.
All right, fantastic. Whereabouts in Texas is that?
It's about 50 miles northwest of Houston.
Okay.
But we're in the country.
And it looks like you're having quite a nice sunny day there.
We are. I'm going to show you my backyard here. Got about 10 acres.
Oh, nice. Lovely. Nice. I don't know if my webcam will show you mine. If I can get out to the window. Can you see?
I can see your NHS picture.
Yeah,
I see it.
There we go. Backyard.
There we go.
There it is. I've got a bit. I haven't got 10 acres, but I've got more than the average in London anyway. So it's a big garden for London.
Okay, so I'm talking to London now. That's cool.
Yeah. We're both in London. I'm in East London and Phil's down in South London.
Yeah.
And so how do you have such an interest in the Astros or Astroball?
Well, we started the podcast last spring. We're both big baseball fans. We've been fans for a number of years, and we're a rare breed here in the UK. There's not many baseball fans over here.
That's what I was wondering.
And but we actually met in 2006, I think, because we were both working in a bookshop, and we both discovered whilst working in the bookshop that we both had a real passion for baseball, and obviously we liked books. And it's taken us that long to come up with the idea of doing a baseball book podcast, but we got there in the end. And we started last spring. We had a bit of a break over the winter because I was having a baby. My wife was having a baby. She's 5 months old now, and we've been back at this for about 6 weeks. We've put out another 4 episodes since we came back. So yeah, it's been going really well. We had we've had a number of authors on and some really positive feedback, but it's a funny time to be producing content because there's not, the audience is just massively diminished at the moment.
Yeah, tell me about it. I edit the Crawfish Boxes. That's a fan blog for the Astros, and
that's the SB Nation.
Yeah, we're having a hard. Yes, right, and it's hard to get content, and we don't have a lot of readers, but we're hanging on. We're going to keep it. We're going to keep the fire lit until baseball comes back.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what you got to do, I think. So you got the questions, yeah?
I do. I have one more question of you. I'm just curious, what made you want to interview me about this?
Oh, okay. Well, we normally the way we normally did it was the way we've done it in the past was talk to people that we knew through like the baseball community, like through Twitter or through social media, or people that we just know who liked baseball and books. So, for example, when we were doing Moneyball, we talked to a guy over here who runs a UK athletics fan club that we both know from over here. And, you know, if we're talking about a team specific book, then we've talked to people who we know who are interested in that team. But we're trying to grow our audience because we've kind of reached saturation point with the number of baseball fans here in the UK. So we're trying to expand a little bit over there. But we've got to about pretty much about 60-40. So 40% UK audience and then 60% the rest of the world, which is mostly US and Canada. But we're trying to kind of grow the podcast. So we thought it'd be a good opportunity to talk to people who are that we don't necessarily know, but who we know are experts on various subjects. So the last episode we did was about the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. And we spoke to someone from SABR who runs the Women in Baseball Committee. And I just approached her because I thought she's the kind of person who would be a good person, you know, to talk to as an expert. We're very much outsiders over here, so it's good to have expert views. And so I looked around at. I actually, if I'm being brutally honest, it's Bill. I can say Bill, right? You, William, but
yes, I like Bill.
Yeah, I was going to say
I go by Bilbo's.
Okay, because when I spoke to Ben, he said, "Oh yeah, say hi to Bill." So I assumed Bill.
Yes.
That when I actually approached, I'm just forgetting his name now. The guy who writes. Sorry.
The Ben.
No.
Okay.
I approached. Let's see. I approached Jake Kaplan, who writes for The Athletic.
Oh, okay.
And he said that he literally said he'd prefer unless he was going to be on the call with Ben, he'd prefer to not do it. And I thought, okay, that's fine. So then we came to you because I thought I knew SB Nation. I used to write for Giants site on. Not SB Nation. What's the other one?
Fansided.
Yeah, that's it. Fansided. So I used to write for Around the Foghorn as a Giants contributor, and so I know that the guys who write for these sites are incredibly dedicated and incredibly knowledgeable. And I thought you'd be the perfect guy to go to. So yeah,
appreciate that. I don't mind that you took me second to Kaplan. I mean, Kaplan's, he's a big deal.
He's the man on the Astros, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. National. Yeah, and he's good. He deserves it.
Yeah. So I don't know if it's. Do you want to dive right in, or because Phil and I were we've got from over here. We know a couple of guys who support the Astros. We know a guy called George who runs the UK Astros Twitter page, and he's very, very dedicated fan. But his reaction to the whole sign stealing scandal has been incredibly defensive, and he's kind of come out really fighting against everybody because he's taken a lot of stick from the fan base, from the community over here. And so he's very defensive of the Astros and what's happened internally there. And I know when I spoke to Ben, he talked about how, and he kind of felt let down a little bit by the organization. Like his view of the organization changed a little bit, from after what happened. And I wondered where you were. But I don't know if you want to talk about it off air first, or if you just want to dive straight into the discussion.
No, let's just dive in. I don't mind talking about that. I think that a lot of us, including myself, were very disappointed by the Astros, and now we kind of saw the signs with the Asuna trade and with the Taubman affair that there might have been something amiss inside the Astros. That's my opinion. I think that they might have, the front office might have been so totally focused on winning that they lost their perspective. I think a lot of people also think that the Astros may have become a scapegoat to some extent. Hard to believe that nobody else was doing this. Beltran, of course, brought it into the clubhouse. And he said at one point, y'all are way behind on this sign stealing thing. Let me show you how it's done. So, where did he learn how to do it? So there's that feeling as well that the Major League Baseball is trying to sweep this under the rug and putting the Astros out to dry. What Richard Nixon called a limited hangout, show some of the dirt and then hide the rest of it. But, that's speculative. And nonetheless, I think that Jeff Luhnow should have been much more proactive once he got the letter from MLB, and that I'm very disappointed in AJ Hinch for not taking a stronger stand, because he was against it.
Yeah,
he had some support in the clubhouse. I don't think Jose Altuve was cheating. I think the trash can hits have been published, and there were very few when he was at bat, and he told people, I don't want that stuff. Josh Reddick wasn't doing it. I'm getting into some of the other questions now, but
I was just going to say, Bill, sorry, shall we, I was going to do a little brief, I was going to do an introduction and then take it in from there. Is that okay? And because we're recording, but we haven't really, we're going to start rolling, if that's okay. Before we start, is there anything you are not wanting to talk about? Is there anything that you don't feel like in your position as a content provider for SB Nation that you don't want to be talking about? Or is it all no holds barred? You're just happy to go into anything?
Let's talk.
Okay,
I don't feel like I'm going to be censored.
Okay, fair enough.
Punished or anything.
So what we'll do, Bill, so just so you know, before I go from the top, then I'm going to do like a little introduction, and then I'm going to, because if you're the listener to the episode, what will happen is you'll hear my brief introduction, then you'll hear the audio of the chat with Ben, and then we'll come back and have our discussion. Obviously, we're not going to listen to the audio now, but so I'll do a little introduction, and then we'll come back and start the discussion, if that's okay.
All right.
So I'm going to say, welcome to Reading the Game, the podcast where baseball fans discuss the baseball books they love. And I'm delighted this episode to be joined by Bill Metzger. Hi, Bill.
Hello there. Good to be here.
And have I got the pronunciation of your surname right there, Metzger, yeah?
You're breaking up on me. Can't hear you.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, sorry. I'll see if I can turn my microphone
up. Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'll turn my microphone up. Keep it turned up if that's okay. Okay, I'm going to start again. And for some reason, my microphone keeps turning down, and I don't really know why, but it's a bit annoying. Can you hear me all right now?
Yeah, you're really loud. Yeah.
You can all hear me, yeah? Okay.
Has Bill frozen?
Bill, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. What happened was I don't have the best internet, so I went to my Wi-Fi. I'm not my Wi-Fi, my streaming on the phone.
Right.
So I was hoping that might help.
Okay. Fine.
So I made a little switch there, and hopefully this will make it work better.
Okay, fine. All right. So I'm going to say, bear with me 1 minute.
And it is working better.
Good. Sorry. Right. Okay. I'm going to just start again. So welcome to Reading the Game, the podcast where baseball fans discuss the baseball books they love. And this episode, we're going to be talking about Astroball, which is the definitive account of the Houston Astros' unexpected rise to win the 2017 World Series from the Sports Illustrated writer who predicted it 3 years earlier. I actually spoke to the author of the book, Ben Reiter, a couple of weeks ago, and we are going to be having an opportunity to chat to Bill Metzger, who writes for the Crawfish Boxes, which is an SB Nation site all about the Houston Astros. But before we get into the discussion, let's go to the audio. And the next thing you hear will be my conversation with Ben, and we'll come back and have a discussion about the book. Okay, so there we go. That's that little introduction done. So if we come back together, Let me just double check. My audio still okay for you, Bill?
Oh. It's fantastic. Can you hear me?
Yeah, good. Yeah.
All right, we're good now.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome back, guys. So just to get us started, then, if I come to you, Bill, can you just give us a brief overview of your involvement with the Houston Astros as a fan, and then talk a little bit about how and when you came to the book Astroball and what your first impressions were?
Well, I'm a Houston Astros fan since the early 1980s. I've experienced, like most Astros, all Astros fans, up until 2017, a great deal of pain and disappointment. And when the Astros finally won the World Series, it's hard to describe the elation that I felt, and all of us Astros fans. In 2017, I also began writing for the Crawfish Boxes, and I currently am the editor. And of course, as a person responsible to the fan base of the Houston Astros, I have to keep touch with things. And a book like Astroball by Sports Illustrated writer Ben Ryder, well, of course I had to read that. And my reaction to the book, I couldn't put it down. It was fascinating. It's beautifully well written. It's engaging, and it's intellectually stimulating as well. And I devoured that book, and I enjoyed writing the book review for it as well.
Fantastic. How about you, Phil? How did you first come to the book?
I was aware of it in the lead up to it hitting shelves in, was it 2018, summer 2018? I think thanks to Amazon's algorithms, it knew that I like baseball, so it was serving me up some suggestions, which Astroball was one. But I didn't read it until recently. And normally my method for preparing for these pods, I read the book thoroughly. I scroll notes in the margins as I go, like my thoughts and observations, my opinions, like great quotes or great paragraphs, and where I might strongly agree or disagree with something written. But this time I made hardly any notes because I was completely engrossed in the book. Ben Ryder can clearly write. He's obviously a great storyteller, and comparisons to Moneyball are fitting, not just in terms of the subject matter, but in terms of the prose style too. There are examples where a writer would do like flash forwards and then flashbacks, and use devices and writing techniques in narrative storytelling to keep readers hooked. So I read it in like 2 sittings, and it was an enjoyable read on so many levels, but more so because I only came to read it until after the sign stealing scandal. So I kind of read it like a classic whodunit, like a crime thriller book. I was constantly looking for clues and for red flags and events in the book that would foreshadow the scandal to come. And yeah, I wasn't disappointed. It's a great book.
Yeah, I have to say, I mean, I'm the same as you, Phil. I can distinctly remember it coming out, and I looked, from afar at the Astros redevelopment, their rebuild, with really keen interest, because it was a really exciting period in baseball history, seeing them come from nowhere to over a period of time to become the dominant force in baseball. The book, like you, I was aware of it, but I have only come to read it after the sign stealing scandal. So again, massively enjoyed this narrative nonfiction and was utterly compelled by the book. I thought it was a real page turner. But couldn't help but wonder what it might have been like to have experienced it before and after the news of the scandal. I mean, I wonder how much that sign stealing scandal is going to kind of color our discussion tonight. But I mean, before we come on to it, I think it'd be nice if we could have a little talk of all the people mentioned in the book, who we think is cast in the most and the least favorable light, because there are some real strong characters in there. If we start with you, Bill, who do you think gets a good write-up in the book, or particularly good write-up?
Well, obviously, it's a rags to riches story for baseball outsiders, Sig Mejdal and Jeff Luhnow. I think that another big hero in the book, and this might also be a big blemish, is Carlos Beltran, who was a negative WAR producing player, but got a whole chapter. I happen to agree that his effect on the chemistry was substantial. I'd written to that effect, but of course now we know there's a negative side to that. I think the one person, this is a book that's celebrating the Astros, so Ben wasn't trying to criticize very much, but I think one person who got a bit of a negative rap was Bo, the manager before AJ Hinch, Bo Porter, who missed out on giving JD Martinez another chance at proving himself. So I think that's one person who didn't come off too well, kind of portrayed as not being behind the curve a little bit.
Not being not attuned to the kind of the overtures of Astroball, the kind of philosophy behind Astroball. Is that what you mean? Yes. How about you, Phil? I mean, I'd have to say I completely agree about Beltran. You know, it's there are recurring examples of his leadership qualities and the influence of his character on other players in the clubhouse. So he's someone who comes across as a real strong character. Was there anyone else in your mind who got a particularly good write-up?
Well, I agree with both of you. I think Carlos. Oh, we've lost a guest.
Yeah. Do you want to?
Close carrying on answering it.
Keep coming. Yeah. Just keep going.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So who gets a good write-up for you, Phil?
I agree with both. I agree with both of you. Carlos Beltran is the answer to both of those questions for me. He's cast in the most favourable light in terms of he was the glue that held the clubhouse together. He had some boxing WBO belts made up so that Astros players could award player of the match awards immediately after each game, which I thought was quite cute. But then that chapter is full of those red flags that I was talking about earlier that gives the reader a whole different feeling in this new context that Ben Reiter certainly never intended. For example, there's a bit where he writes that during games between the at-bats, Beltran regularly received the Astros designated hitter. He spent much of his time in the clubhouse consuming video of not just the opposing pitcher, not just of his own swings, but of his teammates' plate appearances as well. And if they developed a bad habit, he saw them and let them know with visual evidence. And then he later writes that Beltran began spending long hours in the video room watching at-bats for any sign of a flaw of an efficiency, and soon his eyes drifted to the pitchers. It really was like you're reading a classic whodunit, and that that certainly sentences and paragraphs like that take on a completely different context reading the book after the sign stealing scandal as opposed to reading beforehand.
Absolutely. Listen, what I'm just going to do, Bill, we lost you and you came back, but you didn't miss anything. Phil was just talking about the characters in the book. If it's okay with you, Bill, I hope you don't mind. I'm going to just mute you because there's a lot of background noise from your beautiful rural setting. So I can hear the birds tweeting. So if it's okay, I'm just going to mute your mic when Phil or I are talking. Is that okay?
That's fine, of course.
Okay.
Yes,
don't take it the wrong way.
No.
Anyway, I'm going to come to you now, Bill, because I'd like it if you could. I'd like you, if you could, to tell us, as someone who follows the Astros really closely, certainly more closely than either Phil or I over the last few years, was there anything that particularly surprised you? Did you learn anything new that you didn't already know about the organization?
Yes, I think that before that book came out, the feeling was that the Astros were 100% totally about numbers, nothing but numbers, all numbers, Moneyball squared. And there was always a bit of a controversy about that. Had the Astros taken the human element out, and isn't the human element important in baseball? And even with all that we know about sabermetrics now. And the book pointed out that was the genius of Astroball, is that they integrated the human element into the mathematical analytical calculations, and that was the real genius. I mean, for example, when Luno interviewed AJ Hinch, he asked Hinch, "Are you going to? Would you let us make out your lineup?" And Hinch gave the wrong answer. He said, "No, I'm not going to let you do that." But it turned out to be the right answer. Mm-hmm. They wanted a manager that's willing to understand the circumstances the way Hinch handled pitching during the 2017 playoffs was very intuitive. He didn't do things by the numbers because the ball they were using didn't spin, and so he had to improvise with how he handled the staff. And I think that's a big reason why the Astros won the World Series, because he did a better job of handling the pitchers than the Dodgers did.
That human element is something that recurs throughout the whole book. It was something I was definitely surprised about, because, like you, Bill, when the way that the book is marketed and the way the book appears from before having read the book is that it's going to be, like you said, a kind of revised or updated version of Moneyball. And there are obviously parallels with Moneyball, and they've both been influential. I don't think people are incorrect to compare it to Moneyball in a lot of respects. But I think one thing that does come through is that, and perhaps this is something just because of Ben's focus in the book, but he really wants to communicate to the reader the importance of the human. And he clarifies with some of the mistakes that they made, some of the failures they made. I'm talking about, obviously, the situation surrounding JD Martinez, the Brady Aitken thing. So, it's not completely valedictory in nature, the book. It's not just a celebration of the Astros. It really kind of digs deeper into the Astros and tries to work out how they became successful and what it was they did to make them successful. Phil, were you surprised by anything?
I was. I was surprised actually by how sympathetic, I suppose. Maybe sympathetic is the wrong word, but certainly understanding a bit more about the culture that Sig and Jeff created at the club certainly made me empathize. I don't know what the right word is, but maybe it's just understand a bit more the culture that they created that ended up in the sign stealing scandal. Like the writer wrote about Dallas Keuchel, who was initially very skeptical of the Nerd Cave, but came to grow to love it and embrace it. And it was writer spotlight on Dallas Keuchel that really made me understand that culture that Jeff and Sig had created, and one that perhaps laid the foundations for what was to come. You're surrounded by advanced analytics and a determination to coach Astros players to success by reducing or eradicating their weaknesses, and at the same time exploiting weaknesses in in opposition players. So it was often pretty cutthroat, and working in that hyper analytical, high pressure environment where you can't really hide because of the video replays and the data that so easily can reveal your shortcomings, like whether you've begun holding the bat a couple of millimeters too high and your launch angle has dropped, and you're hitting into too many double plays, or you can't hit fastballs on the outside of the plate. That kind of advanced analysis, all of that information and all of that data, it perhaps isn't surprising that in such a culture it could lead to a team trying maybe a bit too hard and stepping over a line.
But then it's really interesting, because one of the things that I thought that really struck me reading the book, and I just picked out a quote from that chapter on the Nerd Cave, Phil, and just to the people, the uninitiated, the people who haven't yet read the book, the Nerd Cave. How is the best way to describe the Nerd Cave, do you reckon, Bill? Can you?
It's the team of rocket scientists and physicists and mathematicians and high-level scientists who got together and turned baseball into a science and analyzed all the finest points and turned it into to numbers, and how you could use those numbers to improve performances.
Because one of the things that I think Jeff Luhnow comes across as really well for doing in the book is the way that he tries to marry together the science and the data with the humanity, with the human element. And I was really interested in some of his backstory, his existentialism in literature course that he did, doing an elective on Albert Camus. It's not the kind of thing that normally brings you into the front office of a high stakes professional athletic organization, but he really broadened his horizons and he managed to blend cultures. And I thought that was incredibly interesting. That's something that I wasn't really aware of. I thought as an outsider that Jeff Luhnow was just a successful number cruncher, but it comes across as incredibly more so than that. But from that chapter entitled The Nerve Cave, I was really interested. There's a quote I just picked out from Jeff Luhnow, and it said, "We thought from the beginning we'd be the most transparent front office in baseball. Is there a risk we'd end up giving away company secrets? Possibly, but we felt like having fans feel like they're involved in the process is important. And it struck me, obviously, in the wake of the sign stealing scandal and all of the stuff that's come out about the Astros since the publication of the book, that they obviously felt internally as if they were being transparent. They obviously felt like they weren't closing down their doors, and they weren't not allowing people to come in and express themselves within the organization. And perhaps that might have been to their downfall a little bit, I'm going to move on, though. I wanted to ask a question, actually, and Phil, you touched on this a little bit when you were talking about Carlos Beltran. But in your opinion, like, do you think there are any elements in the book, any parts of the book that lead you to think that Ben Reiter might have or should have been aware of some suspicious things happening in the clubhouse? We'll start with you, Bill.
You cut out just a little bit. Did you ask me if Ben Reiter should have been suspicious?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. If there's anything,
or the front office.
Well, Ben Reiter.
Okay, it's hard to say what he got to look at. I mean, it seemed like the cheating was so obvious with trash cans. Yeah, I really wonder about that. So. He should. It's easy to look back on it and say, yeah, you should have known they were cheating. Looking back on it with hindsight, I'm not sure that they were going to let a Sports Illustrated journalist in on that. They might have been trying to hide it. So I'm going to give Ben the benefit of the doubt on that. It's also possible that he wasn't ready to spill the beans, but I'm not going to go there and say that's what the fact is. If they were doing it, they didn't want a journalist to know about it. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think? What's your take, Phil?
I agree with Bill. I think we have to trust that Reiter didn't know, and I think that kind of came across in your chat with him, actually, that he felt guilty that maybe he didn't explore some avenues that perhaps he could have done, or he didn't maybe push harder. So yeah, I got a sense from your chat that he was being very honest, and perhaps there was a little bit of anger in him about how things have progressed, and which I'll no doubt address in the podcast that he's doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. From talking to him, I got the impression that were he to have experienced or seen things that led him to believe that they were cheating, that the journalist in him would have been far more interested in bringing that to the public than the book itself. So I don't know. I like you guys. I think I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I suspect that they were trying very hard to conceal things to outsiders in the organization. So I can completely believe that he could have been completely oblivious to what was going on, and even having formed some good close relationships with people within the organization. But yeah, like you, Phil, I think it's going to be incredibly interesting to see his podcast coming out and the television series that's subsequent to that. So
yeah, I can't wait.
Really looking forward to that. If we keep on the subject of the sign stealing, do you think, and talking about Ben Reiter, obviously talking about the book, and perhaps Phil and I are a better place to answer this than you, Bill, because we came to the book after having had the exposure to the sign stealing scandal. But do you think that the scandals surrounding the Astros since the book's publication will have an impact on the legacy of the book? Do you think that it will affect the way that people look at the book in 10, 15, 20 years down the line?
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt about that. I mean, whether he meant to or not, Ben missed a big story. So yeah, the legacy is going to be hurt, just like the legacy of the Astros is going to be hurt. This was a very celebratory book about a great Cinderella story, and it turns out they were cheaters. So yeah, it's going to hurt the legacy of the book.
But do you think the same thing, Phil?
Yeah, sadly, but people should read it nonetheless. Like sales of The Curse of the Bambino have no doubt waned since the Sox broke the curse in 2004, but people should still read it nonetheless. It's still a great book, and this one is too. What about you, Steve? Do you think
I think weirdly, but I'm coming to the book as someone who particularly likes reading about inside organizations. That the book, it is, I'm comparing it to Moneyball again, it's the lazy thing to do, but I think it's apt. Like, I still think it's an incredibly interesting insight into a front office, into an organization, with or without the knowledge that things were going on that, the Astros shouldn't have been doing. In fact, I think, weirdly, there's a chance that it could be like a time capsule. It could be seen as like a historic monument. It could be kind of seen in a really interesting historical context, reading the book back in 15 or 20 years' time, especially as I'm absolutely convinced that there's going to be more to come out on the sign stealing and on the organization in the coming months and years. So I don't know. I think the book may suffer in some audiences, but I think that there's still going to be enough people who are interested in it to see it as a book that they're going to want to read in the future. So I wouldn't be too worried if I was Ben Reiter. I mean, he's written a fantastic book, and I think it will continue to sell into the future, if not perhaps as much as it would have done otherwise.
Yeah, there's still a lot of great content in there that shows you how the Astros completely rebuilt. And they didn't win the World Series in 2017 just on sign stealing. There was a lot of other, clever picks and drafts, and there's definitely a lot of lessons and things.
And also, I mean, it's not the only book to delve or dive into the Astros that didn't pick things up. I'm thinking of Ben Lindbergh and Travis Sorchik's book, The MVP Machine. I don't know whether if the time frames completely match up, but it's difficult to come in as an outsider and get complete, full access, all areas to an organization to be able to go in and look at things. So I certainly don't hold it against the author for missing out on things. I wanted to talk a little bit about how it made you feel about the players. We've talked a little bit about Carlos Beltran. We've talked a little bit about AJ Hinch. We've talked about Jeff Luna. Like, are there any of the players that changed your opinion of them? It certainly made me think a little bit more about George Springer. His backstory I thought was particularly interesting. Did either of you learn anything about the players or change the way that you felt about players from the information about them in the book? You go, Bill.
I had already written a very long article about what I called the Core Four, obviously not a new name, and so there wasn't any information in the book that I didn't know. But I think that this core of Astros players have let's just say any one of this group of four would be considered amazing team leaders on any other team, with great stories, with great backgrounds and difficulties that they had to overcome. I mean, Bregman is not a natural athlete. What he is what he made himself by the most incredible sheer effort. From the time he was 4 or 5 years old, he was just a baseball machine. You couldn't stop him. He still is. That's why they drafted him. Springer, we know his story about stuttering. We know Altuve, what he had to overcome. They called him the midget when he played in Venezuela. And of course, Correa came from terrible poverty. I mean, he cared about being a great baseball player so much that he told his dad, hit me ground balls underneath the tree with roots, because he wanted to get used to fielding grounders. And he'd come to school with black and blue marks all over his face, and the people were afraid his parents were beating him. So these are incredibly driven people, and have great stories and great leadership. It's sad to me that their reputations had to be smeared by the scandal, because I think they're an amazing group, and I really hope they re-sign Springer. And that's the heart and soul and the spirit of the team.
Bill, before I come to you, Phil, sorry, I just want to elaborate or get Bill to elaborate on this, because it seems timely. Like, you're obviously someone who knows the Astros really well. Where does the organization go from here? I know they've obviously made some root and branch changes within and the front office and on field, with the management there. But how deep do you think the resentment towards the organization is, and where are they going to go? If not in 2020, then perhaps into the future, into 2021 and beyond.
2020, if we ever get back to playing, they're well set. 21, they're going to lose. They're going to lose Springer if they don't re-sign him. There's a couple others. After 22, they're going to lose Correa, Verlander, not Garrett Cole, Greinke, Gurriel, and they really haven't, in my opinion, drafted that well in the last few years. They have traded away a lot of their farm system to get people like Cole and Greinke, Verlander. They lost their first and second round draft picks because of the Luno scandal in the upcoming years. I'm a little pessimistic. On the other hand, I think Jim Crane, the owner, deserves a great deal of credit for having hired Luno in the first place. That was a revolutionary idea. I mean, what was Luno? He was just a scouting director. And I think he made an amazingly good pick in James Click from the Tampa Bay Rays. I think the Tampa Bay Rays might be the real best front office in baseball right now. How well they do on their payroll is amazing. And so I think that Click can bring what they know in the Tampa Bay's, the Rays organization, and integrate it with what they know in the Astros organization, and hopefully come up with another kind of Astroball. That's hopeful, but it could be.
And what about externally, Bill? What about the resentment from the rest of the baseball fraternity towards the Astros? How do you feel about that as a fan?
It's going to be there. It's going to be intense, and it's going to last. I think as long as these current players are on the Astros. I heard Ben say it's going to go on forever, and to some extent it will. But I think that at least as long as these players, Springer, Correa, Bregman's a polarizing figure anyway. I'm sad that Altuve gets lumped in with this. He's a very good man, but so it's going to go on for a while, and eventually people will forget. 10 years maybe.
And you mentioned you literally just used the word sad, Bill. I mean, how does it make you feel as a fan?
I think that the Astros got caught up in a culture, and that no one quite knew how to stand up to the peer pressure that was going on within the clubhouse. Altuve and Josh Reddick stood up to it, but only in an individual sense. We won't do it, but no one stood up to it and said, it's wrong. AJ Hinch didn't even feel like he had the power to do that. And I think that under the circumstances, I don't think the Astros were really any different than most other teams, most other clubhouses. I think that let's get back to Beltran. He brought it in. And I think, and talking about the writer's description of Beltran, he had become such an important player, important person in that clubhouse, that it was very difficult once he said, let's do this, for these younger players to say, well, I don't know about that. And I also think that given how important Beltran was to the chemistry of the team, that might have been the reason why Hinch was so tentative about trying to stop it, because then he has to come into conflict with Beltran, and he's splitting the clubhouse. That's just speculation on my part, but that's my theory on that.
It's really interesting to hear you say that, Bill. It's really interesting to hear your take.
It's interesting that just to pick up on something that Bill just said, that from the sign stealing scandal, the aftermath, that there was one person also in the Astros organization who was at the center of everything, and I don't think they got a single mention in the book, and that's Alex Cora. I was wondering what if he was so influential in the Astros clubhouse, why he didn't appear at all in the book. I have no idea.
Well, he was mentioned. He was mentioned, but he was mentioned, but it wasn't elaborated. He didn't get a chapter. He didn't get significant exposure. But then again,
I'm not finding him.
No,
I'm not finding him in the index. So he wasn't mentioned much.
Oh, right. Well, that is interesting. Yeah, especially in light of what's happened since the book's publication, for sure.
Yeah,
I think that one of the worst exclusions in the book was not mentioning Brent Strom, the pitching coach, and I mentioned that in my book review, that the transformation of pitchers before and after the Astros is remarkable, including Verlander, who wasn't really that good when we got him the years before. Garrett Cole, Charlie Morton, go on and on and on. Other guys that just came off the scrap heap and became legitimate pitchers. Brent Strom deserved a lot more mention in the book, in my opinion.
Yeah, they talked a little bit about pitch selection, didn't they, and analysis of pitch usage, but it's particularly in reference, I think, to Colin McHugh. But you're right. There was a little bit of that's a little bit of an aberration, isn't it? Not to have dived a little bit more deeply into what it was that they're actually doing technically as well as just theoretically, because I think that's really interesting. And I think that's one of the things that the MVP machine does incredibly successfully as well. You know, looking at a book which analyzes their success, I think that's really interesting. That Ben Lindbergh and Travis Storchik really picked up on some of the stuff that they were doing mechanically as well as just theoretically. So yeah, that's interesting. I'm thinking about wrapping up. I don't know if there's anything else anyone particularly wanted to mention. I mean, for me, there was just one thing that I really wanted to throw in, because with all the parallels that we're making with Moneyball, I thought it was incredibly interesting. There's a little tidbit in there when Jeff and Sig are trying to sell the idea of drafting Jed Lowry when they're on the Cardinals scouting team, despite him not looking the part. And it really reminded me of the scene in Moneyball where Billy Beane says, perhaps apocryphally, when he says that we're not selling genes. And I thought that was incredibly ironic, given that one of Jeff Lunau's previous jobs was actually using market data to try and sell more jeans for a jeans company. So I just thought there was a really nice little thing there. And I couldn't help chuckling to myself as I read that. And I've sort of pieced together all of those little threads. I thought it was incredibly funny. I don't know if anyone's got anything else they wanted to add.
I'm good.
Phil, did you have anything you wanted to mention? No, I can't think. I'm just looking at the notes that I made. What did I say? I said I thought that the one thing that the book is going to do in terms of making me, how it's going to change the way I watch baseball, was that when baseball starts again, I'm definitely going to look for Yu Darvish when he next pitches and see if I can start seeing his mechanics, whether he's tipping pitches or not. But yeah, I can't really think of any other way that the book is going to make me change the way I watch baseball. But yeah, definitely focusing on Yu Darvish and how he's holding the ball in his hand is definitely something that I'm going to look back on.
I tell you what, though, in terms of influencing the way you think about the sport, like one of the things that the book's been celebrated for from people outside of the baseball community is how influential it can be in the sort of spheres of management and areas like that. And it has been very successful in different industries by leaders of different industries, because they're anxious to take any information and gain any kind of inside knowledge and apply it to their own industries and their own sectors. But I have to say, like, I did think it was incredibly interesting getting that insight into an organization. You don't get that from very many books, and I thought it was really nice to see the human element being really emphasized in the book. So yeah, I have to say that was one thing for me that I really liked.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I'm going to make a comparison to Moneyball again, but the one observation that I took from the book towards the beginning was that actually it gave traditional scouts a lot more credit than Moneyball did, and it really humanized scouts. They're not all dinosaurs, and actually many scouts embraced the nerd cave and the analytics in general. For example, helping scouts realize, based on a regression analysis, if their grades revealed tendencies to over or underrate a certain type of player or a certain attribute. So yeah, they're not quite the dinosaurs that Michael Lewis had me believe, perhaps.
Even Luno himself overrode analytics when he when he picked Joe Kelly when he was with the Cardinals. When he overrode Sig Mejdal on that, and it was scouting that tipped the balance on Carlos Correa, as I recall from the book. So yeah, I agree with that.
And then just lastly to say that I was talking about how you can be influential, but I think the key thing to remember here is that and this is in the context of the sign stealing scandal, is how important individuals are within organizations. There's how influential people can be from within organizations. Obviously, we're talking about Carlos Beltran and various other people on the podcast tonight, but you can have this idea of a baseball front office as being, especially in this sabermetric post sabermetric revolution era, you have this view of them being number crunching machines and very faceless, but actually it's the humans that really make or break an organization, make or break a run. And it kind of reminded me a little bit while we're making comparisons of Barry Sfaluga's The Grind, because that was a book that really, really emphasized the importance of individuals and human personalities within organizations. And then there's a beautiful parallel with The Grind, of course, because the team and the organization that's detailing has just been successful last autumn in the World Series. So I don't know, for me, it kind of married together a lot of thoughts that I'd had in my head kind of floating around, and it worked really well as a kind of melting pot of my thinking about the sport. And so from that point of view, perhaps it has had an influence on me in the way that I think about the game of baseball, even if, really annoyingly, since I read the book, I haven't actually been able to watch any Major League Baseball because of the coronavirus situation. But I'm sure when it comes back, it'll still be at the forefront of my mind. But at least I hope it will anyway.
I can't believe it took that long for somebody to mention the coronavirus. That's amazing.
Sorry. I thought I'd leave it till the last 2 minutes to mention coronavirus. Listen, thanks very much, Bill, for joining us.
My pleasure.
From Texas. It's been great having you share your wealth of information and insight into the Astros organization. It's something that Phil and I just do not have at all, that kind of inside expertise on the organization. So it's great to hear your ideas and your thoughts. Thanks very much for joining us. You mentioned, and I've mentioned as well, the crawfish boxes. Is there something that you wanted to tell listeners about? Is there somewhere that you can be reached on social media, or something that you want to urge people to go and do when they're listening to this, if they want to get more information about the Astros and what you do?
Well, we're at crawfishboxes.com, and we have a Crawfish Boxes Twitter feed. I'm not that active on Twitter personally, but when the games start going, we're going to be really active. I've got a 3-part series posted there right now about Jeff Luhnow Revisited. And partly because you asked me to do this podcast, I wanted to do some thinking about that. I had concluded that the drafting really was overrated. The trading was not that great either, but player development to me seemed to be the secret. They got the most out of the players they had. They took a lot of free agents and made them better, especially in the pitching department. But anyway, crawfishboxes.com.
Okay.
That's where we are.
Fantastic. All right. Well,
do you want to know why we're called that?
Yeah,
I bet you don't know.
It's in the stadium, right?
It's the not crawfish, the
Crawford boxes.
Crawford boxes.
Yeah.
Okay. The stadium was built on Crawford Street, and that little left field box section is called the Crawford boxes. And so crawfish are local crustaceans that come out of the ground.
Yeah.
And in Louisiana especially, but go ahead.
We call them crayfish.
What do y'all call them?
We call them crayfish, I think.
Yeah.
Because there was this really interesting thing that came
in
out
the northern
with George W. Bush talking about crawfish, and nobody in the UK knew what they were. This must have been in his presidency, so it's going back about 15 years. But everyone since then, I've known what crawfish were, so it's quite interesting. Yeah, go on. I interrupted you anyway. Go on.
My up north in the northern part of the United States, that's what they're called, crayfish. And my family lives in Massachusetts, and I actually had an argument with one of my family members who insisted that the only proper name for this creature is crayfish. And I said, well, they grow in Louisiana and Texas, and back down there we call them crawfish. we actually had an argument about it, but that's where we get the crawfish boxes. And they're really popular this time of year. This is when they're out. They grow in the rice paddies actually, and we love to have crawfish boils here in Texas.
Yeah, we get them in Suffolk in England on the East Coast, crayfish tails, absolutely delicious. So yeah.
Yes, indeed.
You're making me hungry.
Yeah.
All right, we'll leave it there. Listen, thanks very much everybody for coming on. It was great chat. I really enjoyed.
Yeah, it was good chat.
We should just say we really enjoyed the book as well. And thanks for listening. Cheers.
Thank y'all.
Goodbye.
Bye.
All right.
Cool.
Thanks a lot, Bill. That was awesome.
Yeah, that was
really
great.
Good.
Yeah, it was fun. I hope it's good. And where can will you send me the link?
Yeah, definitely. So what will happen now, Bill, is that I'm gonna I'll download the audio probably tomorrow. At the moment it's taken ages to upload. It actually uploads to YouTube, but it's private, and then I download it from YouTube, and I can edit the audio, piece together everything, and then possibly get it out on Wednesday. But
okay.
Before I publish it, or when I publish it, I'll email you a link, and then I'll tweet it as well. And if it's okay with you, I'll tweet it. I'll mention the Crawfish Box's Twitter handle when I link it out. So maybe they can give it a retweet and publicize it, because that would be awesome.
Oh yeah, we definitely want to do that.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a video, not just a audio podcast.
No. We normally use Zoom, right? But we had some technical difficulties tonight. So now we're using a site which actually, normally when I use Zoom, I can just download the audio straight away. But with this is like our backup. We used to use this as now our backup, and it actually records the video, but then it publishes it to YouTube. But it's on my private channel, so no one can actually see it. And then I download the video, and then I can take just the audio track from the video. It's a bit of a long process. That's why it takes me a little bit of time to get it all sorted out. But no one will see the video. You don't have to worry about that. I don't want people seeing my face anyway.
No, good.
Okay, me too.
All right.
Well, that's fine. I'll be looking forward to that. So you'll send me the link by email.
Absolutely, yeah. Before it goes out, I will. I'll send it out to you, and then you can share it with whomever you want to share it with.
Oh, it's going on Crawfish Boxes, and we'll probably put the Ben Ryder interview on there too.
Yeah, well, look, this is the thing. I'll put the podcast episode will be the whole thing all edited together.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. It'll be one episode. It'll probably be about an hour long once I've edited it all together, because you've got the Ben section and then you've got our section. But I have to cut things together a little bit, because there's a bit where you dropped off, and so I normally have to edit a few little bits down, but it'll probably be about an hour or maybe 65 minutes. And then, but when you listen to it, it'll just be the whole thing. It'll just be the introduction, then Ben talking, then us talking, but it'll all be together.
Fantastic. All right. I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. Thanks very much again for being a sport and participating, Bill. It was really good having you on.
Thank you. I'm honored that you had me. Appreciate it.
Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
I shall. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
I kicked him out of the studio.
I didn't know you could do that.
Well, there's a thing called kick from studio, and I think it's a funny verb to use. But anyway, I did it. He was good.
Yeah, he's an eccentric character.
Yeah, his sound quality was absolutely awful. I don't know what we're going to do there.
Yeah, did you start muting him? But yeah, even when he speaks,
I thought it wasn't worth it, because in the end, because then what happens is that you get this weird scenario where it's all crisp, beautiful, lovely British audio with Phil and Steve, and then it goes to the swamps of Texas.
He's shuffling papers a lot or something.
Yeah, I've never had anyone do it on their mobile phone, and I've never had anyone do it outside.
You almost had two people doing it on their mobile.
Literally swatting flies away from his face as he was talking. But no, you can sort of normalize the sound a little bit, or neutralize the sound a little bit. And I thought it'd probably be easier and more effective to do it if it was just one track rather than constant cutting in and out of bad sound and good sound. So
yeah,
I'll play on a bit. I've got a long-standing offer from John McKenzie from Absolute Bunts to help with editing audio, and I think I might. I was thinking during this while I was recording, I think I might have to hit him up and see if he can help, because it's something I've never done. Had to really edit out that kind of level of poor quality sound. So I've spoken to him a lot about editing, and it's just he's always said, if you ever need any help, just let me know. So I think I might hit him up. But it does mean it might not get out till Wednesday or Thursday, especially given the amount of hours I'm giving to MLB The Show. My Diamond Dynasty team. So that was good, though. I thought it was good. It was a bit rambly. It was a bit fragmented. It was less like structured than I was hoping. But I think once we started talking about the science dealing, it kind of takes over a little bit. And
we did a lot of good points.
We didn't talk about Yuli Gurriel and the eye narrowing incident, and we didn't talk about. I
almost mentioned him at the end, but I didn't want to end the episode on a downer. I was like, I'm just going to leave it. I'm not even going to mention him.
Also, I was a little bit afraid that that we might reveal like some. I don't know why that we might reveal some like deep-rooted racism from Bill that I just didn't want to kind of have to broach. I just thought it was easier just to leave it out.
Yeah. And also, I was scared of the opposite, of like using him as a stick to go all virtue signally.
Yeah. But also didn't mention Roberto Osuna. He started talking about it before we were actually recording, but before he said we were going to start. So that's a bit of a shame. Although Ben Reiter did actually talk about that and spoke about that with Ben. So it's at least in the episode. So it's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Yeah, it was a good book. It was a good book for a discussion, for reading the game.
Yeah, I mean, I think these episodes anyway, they're